From the moment I first heard the words slip from my own mouth, "My parents are gold diggers," I felt both shock and relief. Shock because I'd never imagined speaking such a truth about the people who gave me life. Relief because at last I had named the emptiness I'd sensed deep inside. My parents' love had always come with a hidden price tag, but that moment was just the culmination of a journey that stretched back decades, through moments of hopeful anticipation, heart-shattering, disillusionment, desperate survival, and hard-won triumph. This is that journey laid out in full, unvarnished detail. My story begins on a brisk September morning in 1997, when I stood in the driveway clutching a duffel bag full of textbooks, clothes, and the naive belief that leaving home for university was the doorway to freedom. The early sunlight dappled across the hood of our minivan, glinting off polished metal as my parents, clipboard in hand, fussed over my final packing list. I remember thinking they seemed proud of me today. But in the recesses of my mind, a quiet voice whispered that something wasn't right. When the car finally rolled up to the campus gates, I swung my legs out, heart pounding with the mix of excitement and nerves that any 18-year-old feels. I turned to wave goodbye. Their voices stopped me cold. My mother looked at me with a practiced smile, then said, "Don't call us." My father's eyes flicked away before he repeated, "Really, don't call us." No hugs, no tears, no words of encouragement, just a curt dismissal that felt colder than any winter wind. I forced a tight-lipped grin and stepped forward, pretending I hadn't heard, but beneath the facade, confusion and hurt coiled in my chest like a restless snake. Over the next few days, I settled into dorm life. I learned the names of my roommate, discovered that pizza delivery at 2 a.m. was glorious, and found that late-night study sessions at the library could be both riveting and lonely. Friends back home, updating them on my classes, even mustered the courage to dial my parents once, twice, no answer. I chalked it up to busy schedules. Surely they'd call me soon. But in my heart, a tiny seed of doubt took root. The semester flew by on a blur of lectures, lab projects, and cafeteria. Food. I joined a coding club at the Student Center, where I found my first taste of real passion. Lines of Java code swirling across the eye, circuits coming alive under my fingertips. I told my parents about my newfound love for software development. In one of my rare letters home, I imagined they'd beam with pride. Instead, no reply. I assumed they were just busy. By Christmas, I was counting down the days. I envisioned the sight of home-cooked meals, the warmth of a living room decked out in twinkling lights, my mother's arms wrapped around me. My imagination painted a scene of family merriment, gift exchanges, laughter. I boarded the train home on December 20th, heart brimming with anticipation. The ride was chuggingly slow, but I watched town after town slip by, each mile bringing me closer to what I believed would be the greatest reunion of my life. When I finally arrived, the air was crisp and smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon. My hand hovered over the doorbell, breath visible in little clouds. I rang once, twice. The door opened just a crack. My mother's eyes met mine, not with joy, but with a cool, appraising look. "You're back," she said flatly. No hug. I stepped inside, expecting to see a glittering tree piled with presents. Instead, the living room was bare, not a single decoration. On the coffee table lay 2 unopened boxes of store-brand cereal and a stack of unpaid bills. I swallowed hard. "You didn't get my letters?" I asked, voice wobbly. "We moved," my father said from the kitchen, where he leaned against the countertop, stirring nothing in a mug. "The forwarding address?" "Expired," he replied without emotion. "Maybe you wrote to the old place?" His words landed like bricks on my chest. I glanced at the mantel. No photographs, no trinkets of my childhood. My boxers and belongings sat untouched in the hallway, clearly unpacked. I felt stunned, disoriented, as if I'd stepped into someone else's home. I spent Christmas week in that empty house, trying again and again to spark some familial warmth, cooking a pot of soup, playing holiday music, even leaving small gifts on their pillows. Each gesture was met with indifference. On the 24th, I sat at the dinner table alone, Candle flickering, no one else joining. By New Year's Eve, I knew something fundamental had shifted. They'd closed the door on me, not just physically, but emotionally. 6 months later, after finals ended, I dialed their number one last time. It rang, then clunked into the hollow sound of a disconnected line. Panic strangled me. Where had they gone? I called relatives and uncle on Mom's side, picked up after the 5th ring. I blurted, "Aunt Marie, have you heard from Mom and Dad? Their number's dead." She sighed. "I was going to tell you after graduation," she said softly. "Your parents moved to Florida last year. I promised them I wouldn't tell you until you finished university. They're worried you'll drop out if you get too distracted." My chest tightened. Why? Why would you tell me? I pleaded. Click. She hung up, leaving me in a void of unanswered questions. In the next 48 hours, the comfortable world I'd known collapsed. No home to return to, no financial support. My savings were scant enough for tuition and books, not for living expenses without part-time work. My dorm contract didn't allow me to stay for the summer. I felt the first spike of real fear. I am alone. I have nothing. Friends offered couches, but their lives moved on. You can't overstress a good friend's hospitality. So I sold my guitar, my sneakers, anything of value I could spare. I loaded boxes onto the curb for $1 apiece. I tagged my second best. Textbooks on the student bulletin board for half price. Week after week, I watched my belongings dwindle as my bank balance hovered near zero. Every night I crammed into a different friend's apartment. One couch smelled of old pizza, another of cigarette smoke. I learned to sleep in clothes so I could flee at dawn and catch the early bus to a 6 a.m. shift at the campus coffee shop. I poured lattes for tips, wiped down tables, memorized orders so well that regulars would remark, "You know me better than I know myself." That money went straight into a hidden envelope taped under my mattress in a stranger's bed. I kept my budget under 20% of every dollar, 20 cents for food, 80 cents saving. My meals were ramen noodles, bananas, and occasional cafeteria pizza when I could scrape together $2. But it wasn't just financial hardship that weighed on. MIT was shame. I'd grown up believing in family as a safety net, a source of unconditional love. Now I learned that conditional love carried a heavy price. Obedience, compliance, keeping my ambitions small. If I stayed out of sight, maybe I could keep their approval. But as days turned to weeks, I resolved I would not be a charity case. I would not settle for scraps of approval. I would build my own life brick by brick, even if it meant starting from nothing. In the bleakest moment of that first summer, something shifted inside me. One late night, exhausted after closing the coffee shop, I wandered into the computer lab, still lit for 24-hour access. I opened a blank file in Notepad and started typing. I refused to be defined by abandonment. That sentence felt like a thunderclap. I searched online for coding tutorials, free resources, anything that could help me learn. I signed up for every MOOC, massive open online course I could find, Python fundamentals, JavaScript basics, Java advanced programming. I devoured lectures at double speed. I spent afternoons in hackathon meets, pitching ideas, an app to connect students for rideshares, a budgeting tool for college kids. I made notes, prototypes, business plans. When autumn arrived, I landed a paid internship at a fledgling startup with 2 founders and a broken coffee machine. I arrived early, fixed the machine, then dove into coding tasks, bug fixes, UI tweaks, database migrations. The work was unpaid, but they covered my bus fare and offered free pizza on Fridays. I took it gratefully. Nights I stayed late debugging, humming lines of code like mantras until they made sense. I made friends among the team junior devs and designers who became my second family. We shared burritos at midnight, commiserated on failed builds, celebrated small victories. After 6 months, they offered a part-time paid role. I kept my college courses, managed to attend classes between shifts, and saved every extra dime. Those early projects, fixing a sign-up bug here, optimizing a query, there laid the groundwork for my career. By the time I graduated, I had a portfolio of real-world work, and a handful of glowing references. On graduation day, I walked across the stage in a cheap cap and gown I'd borrowed, but I carried my head high. I had earned my place. I had proven that I wasn't just a child to be packaged up and shipped off. I was a developer with a future. The next chapter unfolded swiftly. I accepted a full-time junior developer position at a mid-sized tech firm, where I worked on enterprise software for small businesses. The first year was humbling code reviews that read like a foreign language, nights spent Googling error messages, endless cups of black coffee. But with each challenge, I grew more confident. I volunteered for stretch assignments, leading a small team to implement a new reporting feature, presenting progress in front of stakeholders, mentoring interns. My managers took note of my drive and willingness to learn. By year 3, I was promoted to senior developer, and by year 5, team lead. Through those years, I stayed vigilant about my savings. I lived in a modest studio apartment, drove a used car paid off in full, and kept monthly expenses lean. I traveled only when I could afford it without tapping my safety net. I invested in professional development conferences, advanced courses, certifications. I networked relentlessly, sending LinkedIn messages, attending hackathons, contributing to open source projects. I learned not just technical skills, but how to negotiate offers, how to build relationships, how to brand myself. Each contract review, each salary negotiation felt like reclaiming a piece of the agency my parents had tried to deny me. In 2024, after nearly 2 decades of relentless effort, I was offered the position of Vice President of Engineering at a fast-growing software company. It was the culmination of every line of code typed, every networking email sent, every sleepless night debugging. The compensation package included a generous salary, equity, comprehensive benefits, everything my parents had once deemed impractical when I chose coding over accounting. As I signed the offer letter, I thought back to their chilly farewell on move-in day. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I made it, without you, do." 2 weeks ago, from the corner of my office window, I spotted my mother's familiar silhouette on the sidewalk below. She paused under the building's awning, glanced at her phone, then sent a message. When her eyes met mine through the glass, wide with surprise, perhaps recognition, I felt a rush of emotions. Vindication, anger, curiosity. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Dinner tonight, Mom?" My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it, to ignore her forever. But another part, the part that still craved answers, stepped out. 7 p.m., the Brixton Grill. That night I arrived early and chose a table facing the entrance. When she walked in, dressed in a conservative blouse and skirt, her hair styled just so, I felt the old ache of abandonment flare up. I stayed calm, sipping sparkling water as she slid into the seat across from me. Before I could speak, she blurted, "I'm so proud of you." The words felt hollow, rehearsed. My father appeared moments later, shaking hands with the manager, as though he owned the place. He joined us, the 3 of us around a candlelit table, and ordered a bottle of their finest Chardonnay. The waiter left. For a moment there was silence, thick and awkward. Then my father cleared his throat. "We wanted to see you succeed," he said, voice smooth, "but we worried your passion for software was frivolous. Counting would have been steady, reliable." My mother nodded, eyes downcast. I leaned forward. That frivolous path made me a millionaire. It gave me a career I love, a team I respect, and a life I built from scratch. Where does that leave us? I watched their faces pale under the restaurant's warm lighting. They exchanged glances. My mother spoke first, voice trembling. "We did what we thought was best." My father took her hand, then turned to me. "And now we'd like to make amends. He paused, swallowing. "We want $2 million for raising you." My breath caught. $2 million for being born, for existing. The absurdity of it was stupefying. I sat back, processing the ask as the waiter refilled our glasses. I felt a strange mix of pity and rage. Pity for their twisted view of parenthood as an investment expecting dividends. rage for the years of pain and struggle they'd caused. I met my father's gaze steadily. "You're asking for $2 million so you can take credit for my life's work?" I exhaled slowly, then said, "No, I'm not writing that check. I'm not a bank account. I'm your son. That's enough." I reached across the table and set my half-full glass of water down. "Thank you for the dinner. Good night." Rose and walked away before they could respond. In the days since, I've replayed every moment in my mind. Their request wasn't just outrageous. It was the final proof I needed that they never saw me as their child. They saw me as an asset, a future return on their investment. But I am more than their projection. I am a man who learned to stand on his own 2 feet, to code his destiny, to build a life that no one can revoke. So here we stand, you and I, on the edge of our own choices. I tell my story not for sympathy, but as a reminder that sometimes the people who should love us most can disappoint us profoundly. And sometimes we have to turn away from them to discover our true worth. If you've ever been abandoned, underestimated, or seen as nothing more than what you can provide, know this: you are not defined by others' expectations or demands. You have the power to write your own code, your own narrative, and to rise resilient from any starting point. Now I ask you, how would you respond if the people who brought you into this world saw you only as a dollar sign? Would you turn and walk away like I did? Would you confront them, demand answers, reclaim your dignity? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Together, let's build a community that values each other as humans, not as wallets. And if you want more tales of resilience, triumph, and the astonishing truths of real life, hit subscribe and ring the bell, because the next story might just inspire you to take that first step toward your own breakthrough.